I got pregnant with the boss's kid, lol. I'll be taking over as the boss's wife now. At that moment, something inside me snapped. Clara, my husband's mistress, had been mocking me, flaunting her youth, and trying to assert her superiority relentlessly. She even took my job as the president's secretary, and now she's aiming for my husband. Well, I won't hold back anymore. I'll make sure they both plummet to the depths of hell. I decided to bless Jeremy and Clara. I signed the divorce papers that Jeremy handed to me. Of course, I received a hefty compensation. They got married in Italy with a grand ceremony. Things changed a week later. I got a call from Clara. Hey, Jeremy hasn't come home. As his ex-wife, you must know where he is, right? Clara's voice was frantic. I laughed maliciously, just as I had expected. Ah, I kept quiet, but he is. Eh? I exposed my husband's terrible secrets. My name is Ivy, a 58-year-old working housewife. I work as the president's secretary at my husband Jeremy's company, 6am. I wake up earlier than my husband to prepare breakfast. Then I head to work alone, tidying up and cleaning the president's office. It's a daily routine. I want Jeremy to work comfortably. 8am. Jeremy arrives at the president's office. Thank you, Ivy. You cleaned again today? I approached Jeremy and retied his tie. It's fine, dear. You want to work in a clean room, right? Haha, that's right. Jeremy and I were married through an acquaintance's introduction. We haven't been blessed with children, but we've lived together, supporting each other. This year marks our 30th wedding anniversary. The company, taken over by Jeremy from his father-in-law, is stable, and I've had no complaints about our life. By the way, the new business you planned, Leo is going to fund it. The transfer was confirmed earlier. That's great. Joe seems to like you. You negotiating helped a lot. The company is run by Jeremy as the president and his brother as the chairman. Brother-in-law's name is Leo. Jeremy calls him Joe. Remember, Leo funded another new business you planned before. Aren't you proceeding with that? I casually asked, and Jeremy looked annoyed. Ah, it's fine. I'll handle it. Okay. Nothing special on today's schedule, right? Yes, because you mentioned it before. Jeremy smiled contentedly. Good, good. Then, Ivy, there's someone I want to introduce to you. I'll bring them here, so wait for me. Understood. Someone to introduce? I felt a sense of discomfort at his words. Soon, I heard laughter from the hallway. Jeremy's voice, and another was a young woman's voice. As I wondered about their friendly demeanor, the office door opened. Kept you waiting, huh, Ivy? Jeremy said with a pleased look. But I forgot to respond to Jeremy, fixated on the woman sitting next to him. A very young woman. Her hair was long and neatly arranged, and she was dressed in a mini skirt that revealed her thighs and a camisole that exposed her chest. It was as if she was dressed for a night out. However, she wore it impressively, and I was astounded by her youth. This is Clara. She'll be working here from today. Nice to meet you. I was dumbfounded. Is this a joke? My husband introducing a young woman to me. This alone was bad for my heart. Moreover, we don't hire fresh graduates. Excuse me, but how old is Clara? She's 23. I met her at a bar with friends. We hit it off, and she's young and fresh. Gives me energy. Don't you think she'll boost the morale of our employees? Yes. He must be serious. unable to say anything in front of my husband's radiant expression. Then Ivy, please teach Clara the ropes. Clara is going to work as a general employee, right? Then, wouldn't it be better if… Oh, I forgot to say. We're going to have 2 secretaries from now on. So please teach Clara the secretary work. 2 secretaries. Is that necessary? Well, you're getting on in years. It's okay to pass on work to the younger ones. Jeremy laughed lightly, and it pained my heart. Age, the way you say it. Then, take care. I'm going out for a bit on a personal errand. I'm counting on you to show her the ropes. With that, Jeremy left Clara and me alone in the president's office. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Once Jeremy decides on something, he tends to rush into it, and he spectacularly fails, only to regret it later. This has happened often throughout our marriage. It's useless to say anything at times like this. For now, I'll just do as he says. It's bound to not work out anyway. Hey, Ivy. Clara tapped my shoulder. Yes? How old are you, Ivy? Feeling it was wrong not to answer after asking her age, I told her the truth. I'll be 58 this year. But it seemed my sincere feelings did not reach Clara. What? You're as old as my grandmother, poor thing. You could die any time. And yet you still work. That's kinda sad. I gave a wry smile. I like my job. It's not sad. Ah, I see. The sad one is the boss, right? Whether he's at home or at work, he's always with an old woman. Really, poor thing, LOL. With each word she said next, my face grew more strained. What exactly are you trying to say? You don't get it? I guess when you get older, your brain starts to slow down, LOL. Clara let out a big sigh and clearly said, being young and beautiful, I have a higher status than an old lady like you. You understand, right? Her smile was full of confidence, and I shivered. I couldn't stay silent any longer. You know, you should learn some common sense. Ah, did I make you angry, LOL? Is it menopause? What? See, you get angry so quickly, LOL. It must be hard to keep working if you get upset over such things. Plus, with menopause, you sweat a lot and get short of breath, right? It's embarrassing to try so hard. Maybe it's time for you to retire. As I stood dumbfounded, Clara laughed and whispered in my ear, Why don't you retire as the president's wife too? I shuddered. This person intends to take Jeremy away from me. I couldn't help but raise my voice. Enough is enough. With that kind of intention, I can't teach you anything. Leave the company right now. I expected a quarrel, but Clara looked at me, with tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. What? I didn't mean it. I just wanted to get along with Ivy and made a joke. But it was too much. Too much. Clara collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She looked like the heroine of a tragedy. I'll leave this company. Thank you for everything. Clara ran out of the room. What is happening? Overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, I stood there dumbfounded until Clara returned, with a red-faced Jeremy in tow. What are you doing? His sudden yell made me tremble. What's wrong, dear? I heard from Clara. You yelled at her. It's because she said something terrible. Don't lie. I've been listening to your conversation. What? Clara had recorded our argument on her mobile phone. The recording started from the moment I scolded Clara, giving the impression that I suddenly blamed her without reason and made her cry. That's why she apologized so sincerely. sobbing and all. I bit my lip in frustration. You don't believe me. Believe. Clara came to me crying about what you did. There's a recording. It's clear whose words have more credibility. A secretary who bullies employees is fired as of today. I couldn't believe it. I had always supported Jeremy, both at home and at work. He would abandon me for Clara, who just joined the company? Wait, then who will do the secretary's job? It's decided Clara will do it. That's impossible. And what about you? I swallowed the words that had almost slipped out. I tried again, in a way that only Jeremy and I would understand. You know, about your hobby. I'll handle that myself. I prefer pure and cute Clara over you, who lies to me, the president. Besides, a young and beautiful girl like her suits me better than you do, don't you think? Jeremy narrowed his eyes happily and looked at Clara beside him. Clara looked up at Jeremy with adoration and flashed a brilliant smile. Then she turned to me and stuck out her tongue just a little. I protested to Jeremy many times, but he wouldn't listen at all. The job of a secretary is not easy. Despite my insistence that Clara couldn't handle it, all I got back were his overly optimistic words, saying it was an exaggeration, or you won't know until you try. He must think he's become a knight protecting his princess. I was speechless at his foolishness, hardly what you'd expect from someone running a company. Eventually, Jeremy threw out my personal items from my workspace. Instead, he arranged a brand new desk and cute stationery for young people, all for Clara. It was all in vain. Realizing this, I decided not to waste any more effort and left the company. However, Jeremy didn't come home that night. He didn't return my calls either. I thought it was just his way of getting back at me, but as a week, a month, 3 months passed, I grew anxious. One day, I was called to the company by Jeremy and was heading to the president's office. Maybe he finally understood how hard the secretary's job was? Thinking he might have decided to let Clara go and call me back, I knocked on the president's office door with a sliver of hope. Come in. As I opened the door, I was met with an unbelievable scene. Jeremy, smiling happily, was holding hands with Clara beside him. The two of them looked at me and laughed joyously. It's been a while, Ivy. We have some big news today. What is it? Actually, Then Clara put her hand over Jeremy's mouth. Let me say it, okay? I want to thank the wife. Right. Jeremy nodded deeply, and Clara said to me with a beaming smile, We're getting married. Thank you for everything you've done for Jeremy. What? In front of my shaken self, Jeremy laughed sheepishly. No, I thought there's no point in hiding it. I'm thinking of starting a second life. You're getting old, too. It's better for you to live quietly by yourself. What is that? How dare you? I felt as if the blood had drained from my body. Wait a minute, Ivy. The talk isn't over yet. Here. A present. I made a copy for you. Clara handed me a few sheets of paper. They were printed with black and white photos. Seeing them, I felt sick. This ultrasound. Don't tell me. Clara nodded slowly and gently stroked her belly. As she came closer and whispered in my ear, I got pregnant with Jeremy's child. I'll be taking over as the president's wife now. At that moment, something inside me snapped. She had mocked me, the president's wife, flaunted her youth, and tried to assert her superiority at every turn. She even took my job as the president's secretary, and now she's aiming for Jeremy. Well, I won't hold back anymore. I'll make sure they both plummet to the depths of hell. I decided to bless Jeremy and Clara. I signed the divorce papers that Jeremy handed to me. Of course, I received a hefty compensation. They had a grand wedding in Italy. Things changed a week later. I got a call from Clara. Hey, Jeremy hasn't come home. As his ex-wife, you must know where he is, right? Clara's voice was frantic. I laughed maliciously, just as I had expected. Ah, I kept quiet, but Jeremy is. Eh? I exposed my husband's terrible secrets. He has a favorite hobby. He's probably in Vegas right now. Vegas? Ever heard of it? There's this big hotel in Las Vegas with a casino. Jeremy always rushes there whenever he has a chance. Clara gasped. Does that mean? Yes. Jeremy is probably indulging in gambling right now. I was the one who carefully scheduled his time to prevent him from getting too involved. It seems the new secretary was kept in the dark. He didn't want to show his bad side, spending the money he earned on gambling. Clara was silent, seemingly in shock. I let out a small laugh. I'm actually thankful to you. What? Jeremy started getting into gambling these past few years. It seems someone from a new business partner invited him. And what about it? Before you came along, there was still a bit of affection left in Jeremy. I was worried about him falling deeper. But now, I've completely cut him off. Taking such a low man off my hands and even giving me a hefty compensation, there couldn't have been a better opportunity. Thanks to you, I can enjoy my second life. I laughed heartily. I could hear Clara breathing heavily over the phone. Don't you dare joke about this, getting all high and mighty. Then, goodbye. You have a tough road ahead as the president's wife. I said sarcastically and hung up on Clara, ignoring her shouting from the other end. A few days later, as I was relaxing in my new condo, the doorbell rang. Could it be a delivery? I haven't ordered anything. Suspicious, I looked through the peephole. There stood my ex-husband, Jeremy, his face red with anger. You're there, aren't you? Ivy. How dare you tell Clara about the gambling? The gambling. Understanding the situation, I decided to let Jeremy in. He must have hired a detective to find my address. Running away now would only lead to him chasing me again. Might as well settle things here. I had important information to share with him. I prepared a clear file with documents before opening the door. It's been a while, hasn't it? I greeted him with a graceful smile. What do you mean, it's been a while? After you ruined my family, how can you still smile? Jeremy was furious, shouting and trying to intimidate me. But such tactics don't work on a wife of many years. Oh my, why are you so red-faced? What happened? It's none of your business. I chuckled. He came here just to vent his anger. But I could see through what had happened between them. You must have had a fight with your wife. Shut up. Clara must be unhappy with most of your income going to gambling. She told you she would manage the finances. And you're on an allowance now, right? Jeremy froze in shock. How? How do you know that? Did you plant a bug or something? He asked seriously, and I burst into laughter. You did the same thing with me when your gambling came to light. You said, "What's wrong with spending the money I earned on my hobby?" You must have repeated the same with Clara, leading to a fight. And now you're taking it out on me. Jeremy clenched his fists and fell silent. Don't underestimate a wife of 30 years. I thought to myself, seeing his frustrated face. You should be thankful I managed your schedule as your secretary. I minimized your gambling time to save you from ruin. Can a naive 23-year-old do that? Well, you have no choice but to let her try. You're having a child after all. Child. At that word, Jeremy's face lit up. What a transparent man. Yes, Clara and I are having a child. Unlike you, who's infertile, she can give me an heir. You lost as a woman. Jeremy looked down on me triumphantly. That's great for you. We're happy. Don't try to ruin my family again. I came here to warn you today. Jeremy pointed at me, saying so. I tilted my head, puzzled. Me, ruin it? I have no such intention. In fact, I'm thinking of helping you. Help me? Jeremy looked perplexed, clearly at a loss. Did you go with Clara to the gynecologist? Huh? That place is for women. Clara said she wanted to go alone, so I didn't accompany her. You saw the ultrasound photo, right? The glossy, thick paper. Photo paper. No, the one I saw was just thin, regular paper. I thought so. I presented Jeremy with several photos I had pulled from a clear file. They were grainy, black and white photos. An ultrasound of a baby. Jeremy's eyes widened. What? You're pregnant? Of course not. This was a gift from Clara. She's quite prepared, isn't she? Printing these out from the internet for me. Internet? Jeremy looked puzzled. I handed him a piece of paper. It was a printout of a blog post from 2 years ago. The post was a pregnancy announcement with ultrasound photos. Compare this with the earlier photo. Notice anything? After looking back and forth between the photo and the article, Jeremy's face turned pale. You don't mean? That's right. I matched the copied photo from the article with Clara's ultrasound photo, holding them up to the light. The baby's silhouette in the noise matched perfectly. Do you know about image search? It's a feature that searches the internet for images similar to the one you have. I found this blog using it. She must have copied the article directly, cutting out the photo neatly. So the child? Jeremy went pale, looking like he might collapse. I decided it was time to deliver the final blow. It's a lie. There's no one in her belly. Jeremy collapsed to his knees. No, that can't be. She wouldn't lie about something like that. Impossible. After everything I've bought for her. Designer clothes, bags, even an expensive engagement ring. Jeremy vented his confused emotions by repeatedly hitting the floor with his fist. His actions were so ridiculous, I couldn't help but smile. It's a shame you couldn't become a father. When you think about it, considering your age, it's doubtful you could have fathered a child. Thinking a young partner would guarantee a child was naive. Ask Clara for the truth. I'll call her over now. Jeremy was too drained to argue. He just slumped there, silent. I had Clara come to the condominium. Soon after, the doorbell rang, and I opened the door. Upon seeing me with Jeremy, she screamed, "What are you doing here? Trying to take Jeremy back from me?" No. Didn't I say I was thankful to you? I have a baby in my belly. You can't tear us apart. Clara screamed triumphantly, not listening to me. She entered and gently embraced Jeremy's shoulder. Are you okay? Let's go back and talk about the money. I'll manage the finances. That's okay, right? We'll overcome this trial together. After all, in my belly. Shut up. Jeremy slowly stood up. He looked at Clara intently, and quietly said, "You. The pregnancy is a lie, isn't it?" Clara's face contorted noticeably. "What? What are you talking about, honey? Tell me the truth, Clara. The pregnancy is real. I showed you the ultrasound photo. Our child is the fruit of our love. How can you deny that?" Clara sat on the floor, breaking down in tears. But then she raised her head and glared sharply at me. "You must have been filled with weird ideas by that woman. You're just jealous because you're old and I'm young and beautiful." Clara huffed arrogantly. I laughed back at her. "Is that all you have to say? Huh? Hey, Jeremy, let's just go home, okay?" Clara tried to pull Jeremy's arm, but he brushed her off. "Enough, Clara." "Huh?" Jeremy thrust the blog post copy and the ultrasound photo at Clara. "There's no escaping the truth now. I trusted you. How could you lie about something like this?" I was so happy I cried. Then Clara's expression vanished. "Hey, Jeremy." "What?" Jeremy looked at me with wet eyes, an upward gaze seeking sympathy. I just wanted to test Jeremy's love for me. I was afraid I was just being played with. That's why I said I was pregnant. Then, Jeremy, you said you wanted me to have it, right? I was so happy. Clara's radiant smile left Jeremy speechless. "So the lie was because Clara loves me?" "That's right. We can start working on having a child now. My beauty and your brains. It'll be a wonderful child. Eventually becoming a president and earning lots of money." That's not going to happen. I brought Jeremy and Clara back to reality from their little world. "Hey, we were having a moment here. Do you really think this man has money?" I asked calmly. "Of course. He's a president after all." "I see. Indeed, our company has been passed down through generations and isn't doing badly. But that's about the company as a whole. This man is a gambler. You do understand what that means, right? Eh?" Clara's face turned pale as she clung to Jeremy. "Hey, Jeremy, you're rich, right? You told me once we're married, we'd live a wealthy life because you have more money than you know what to do with." Jeremy responded in a faltering voice. "It's okay. I've lost some money gambling, but we're starting a new business soon. That'll be our big break." "What are you talking about?" I pointed out Jeremy's ugly lies. "I know for a fact there's no new business venture planned." "What do you mean? You got funding from Leo recently, right? Where is that money now? Surely it wasn't spent on luxury brands and an engagement ring for a new wife?" I glared at Jeremy. "What? That's not something I would do." Jeremy laughed derisively, though his voice trembled. I sighed briefly. "You embezzled the company's money." Jeremy swallowed hard under my steady gaze. "I had suspicions. You've been saying you're starting new ventures and getting funding from Leo, but no business ever materializes. Just one new venture after another. It was odd not to doubt. So I spoke with Leo to gather solid evidence. You teamed up against me. Then the money Joe transferred that day was a decoy. You transferred the business funds directly into your own bank account this time. Usually, you're more careful, using various accounts to avoid detection. What? Were you that desperate for money? Trying to prove to Clara you're wealthy?" Jeremy fumbled for words, confirming my suspicions. I said the last word. "You're done. Get arrested and live as a criminal for the rest of your life." "Shut up. It's a family matter. It'll probably just end with probation. Besides, Joe will bail me out. Even if I'm charged, I'll be out in no time. Jeremy reassured himself. Why do you know all this? You were supposed to be fired. You have nothing to do with this. Leo told me. Joe did? Yeah, it's me. Leo hired me. What? Jeremy opened his mouth in surprise. I explained calmly. Yes. When he heard you dumped me, he contacted me immediately. He apologized for your terrible actions and asked if he could hire me back. I said yes right away. You didn't know. Joe was keeping it from me. That bastard. I'm grateful to Leo. He's put me in charge of schedule management, and I'm earning more than before. I showed a broad smile, and Jeremy gritted his teeth. That Joe. I'll confront him right now. As Jeremy was about to leave, that's when it happened. Hey. Clara grabbed Jeremy's arm. She pulled him towards her with strength, their faces almost touching. Her expression was devilish. Hey, you lowlife. Huh? Jeremy was taken aback by Clara's uncharacteristically low voice. Taking a deep breath, Clara yelled, You lied to me, flaunting your wealth, and in reality, you're just an old criminal. Don't mess with me. I'm sorry, Clara. Jeremy, though terrified, took Clara's hand. Looking into her eyes, he slowly said, But it's okay. I'll probably get probation, and I can return home. I might be ousted from the company, but we can still be happy without money if we're together. Don't joke with me. Clara shook off Jeremy's hand and glared at him as if he were filth. There's no way a beautiful young woman like me would live with an old, penniless man like you, after I lied about being pregnant to get us to marriage. Ah, what a waste of time. The worst. Clara shoved Jeremy aside and left the room. Clara. Wait for me. Clara. Shut up. Clara slammed the door shut. Jeremy, abandoned by his new wife, stood at the entrance like a ghost. I spoke to Jeremy. Please leave. This is my house. Hey, Ivy. What? Can't we start over? Me as the president, and you as the secretary. Like before. Jeremy tried to charm me with a fawning smile, but I flatly rejected him. It's impossible. I hate you. I never want to see your face again. Jeremy's eyes widened, and he started to tremble. Enough of that. I opened the door and pushed Jeremy out. As I locked the door and began watching TV, Jeremy quietly left the condominium, realizing it was all over. Later, Jeremy was arrested. He had thought Leo would bail him out, but that expectation was wrong, and he was taken to a cold jail cell alone. Jeremy was arrested for embezzling funds entrusted to him by Leo. Besides, he had told suppliers and related companies he was starting new ventures, asking for loans, and then diverting those funds to his personal account for private use. Jeremy received a sentence without probation and won't be out for several years. As for Clara, she was suspected of conspiring with Jeremy and was investigated. Though no evidence of conspiracy was found, the police discovered she had been scamming money from various businessmen, approaching wealthy-looking men in bars, becoming their girlfriend, and then claiming she needed money for a pregnancy or a parent's surgery. Essentially, Jeremy was also a victim of Clara's scams. Clara was arrested for fraud. Thus, both of them ended up in the care of the police. Half a year has passed since Jeremy's arrest. I am still working with Leo. Recovering the company's image after a scandal is not easy, and Leo is always worried. I want to support him, feeling grateful to him. One evening, I returned to the company with Leo. He sank deeply into his chair, exhaling. It's been a tiring day. We had a series of business dinners. Leo looked into my eyes and smiled. Wow. But thanks to you, Ivy, picking a good restaurant, we had an enjoyable meal. Many of the clients are around my age, so they appreciated the healthy yet luxurious dining experience. Plus, none of them knew about today's place. It was like a surprise. Thanks to that, the conversation flowed well. Thank you. Leo wore a gentle smile. Unlike Jeremy, Leo is always calm and composed. When he speaks with someone, he always uses polite language, and his sincere character is evident. I find Leo's personal charm appealing. It's too kind of you to say. As I thanked him, Leo sighed contentedly. To think someone as capable as you was Jeremy's spouse, truly surprising. I chuckled lightly. Former spouse. I have no relation with him anymore. Right. By the way, Ivy, how long do you plan to work? Don't you think about retiring and living quietly at home? I answered with a smile. I love my work. As long as I'm physically able, I want to keep working. Leo nodded happily several times. I want you to help me rebuild this company. It's going to be a long partnership, but I'm counting on you from now on. I nodded firmly. Yes, Leo. As I responded energetically, Leo laughed as if amused. Seeing his laughter made me feel warm inside. My second life is surely going to be enjoyable. Looking at Leo's smile, I thought just that.
Mom, I'm pregnant. Stumbling over her words, my 14-year-old daughter Madeline reveals this to me. Her frail, haggard appearance makes it all too easy to imagine how much anguish and tears it took for her to utter those words. There's no trace left of the bright, energetic Madeline from before. I couldn't possibly believe what Madeline was telling me, but being handed a positive pregnancy test leaves no room for doubt. Still not fully grasping the extent of Madeline's pregnancy, I gently try to probe for more details. It must have been so hard carrying this alone. Thank you for telling me. When did you take this test? I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Did you buy the test yourself? And who's the father? If she's pregnant, there has to be someone responsible. I know I shouldn't pry too much, but without understanding the situation, I can't take the appropriate actions for her. Yet no matter how much I call out to her, Madeline just keeps mumbling apologies, either confused or terrified of something. The next day, I consult with my husband Daryl. But kind-hearted and extremely sensitive Daryl becomes distraught over Madeline's pregnancy. Worried for them both, the three of us head to the nearest station to go to an obstetrician. But on the train platform, I realize I forgot my insurance card and have to rush back home, leaving Daryl and Madeline. Returning home, I grab the insurance card and am about to hurry out when the landline, which rarely rings, starts ringing. Sensing something ominous, I pick up the receiver and receive news that Daryl and Madeline have been taken to the hospital. Not wanting to accept reality, I rush to the hospital, searching for them to no avail. An officer at the hospital tells me the truth, leaving me in utter shock. I burn with a fierce desire for revenge against whoever subjected my precious family to such a terrible fate. Back home, I gather the people I need to talk to and immediately confess. Daryl and Madeline, they jumped in front of a train and committed suicide. My name is Sherry. I'm 43 years old. Originally from Boston, I worked in sales at a major insurance company. But when I got married, I quit my job and moved to my husband Daryl's hometown in the countryside. We live with his parents. The reason is that I fell in love with Daryl, who was working hard to preserve the fine traditions of his parents' bespoke tailoring shop for the future, and wanted to support him. The products sold at my in-laws' bespoke shop were too good to let fade away. I fell for Daryl, but another big factor was that I felt strongly drawn to the products my in-laws were selling. Sales have been in the red lately, haven't they? Yeah, it's not good at all. It's the changing times, I guess. Almost all the other shops have gone out of business. Ours is pretty much the only bespoke tailor left around here. For a while after moving to the countryside, I also worked at the bespoke shop handling sales. So even without hearing the numbers, I knew we were operating at a loss. Most of our business hours are quiet, with no customers. My in-laws' acquaintances do come to buy things, but it's only a handful of patrons. It's not uncommon to go a whole day without a single customer. Even without sales, it still costs money just to keep the shop running. The people making the products here are my father-in-law Jody, Daryl, and a few other craftsmen. Sales are handled by my mother-in-law Sue, my sister-in-law Sylvia, and myself. It may be a small operation, but with employees to support, operating at a loss like this means we're on the brink of shutting down. At this rate, each day will just be a slow decline into ruin. I couldn't stand that. As a woman of action, I got permission from my in-laws to put my skills from my insurance job to full use, pitching our products to various shops. While looking for places that would carry our wares, I also started working on developing new products suited to the times. Still a novice when it came to bespoke tailoring, I first visited a couple who used to run a bespoke shop and were friends with my in-laws, to gain some knowledge. From there I expanded my network, researching and gathering information on what kind of bespoke tailoring is desired today. I've never seen suit designs like this before. But these are designs you developed together with various people. I'll discuss it with Dad and the other craftsmen. Thanks. I hope this can help boost our sales, even just a little. Thanks to the new products I painstakingly developed with many people, customer traffic began to increase slightly. After that, with the birth of my daughter Madeline, I no longer had the leeway to show my face at the shop. But wanting to contribute to sales even a little, I started selling our products on social media. Struggling for over a decade like this, I devoted myself to launching many new products, selling online, and securing partner shops to carry our wares. Before long, the bespoke shop had finally pulled through the crisis of closing down. As the bespoke shop's business got on track and Daryl grew into a fine craftsman, our daughter Madeline entered middle school. At an age where she could act independently and had a solid way of thinking, I felt a bit lonely realizing my role as a parent would gradually become less necessary. But more than that, I was filled with heartwarming feelings watching Madeline enjoy her days to the fullest, smiling brightly as she devoted herself to clubs and physical activities. About a year passed smoothly, and around the time Madeline turned 14 and advanced a grade. Madeline, who had been so lively and cheerful, suddenly became gloomy. At first I thought it might be teenage rebellion, but she still obediently listened to what Daryl and I said without avoiding us, so there had to be another reason. Madeline, did something happen recently? You don't seem like yourself. It's nothing. I think I'm just a bit tired from sports. I'm going back to my room. Even when I tried to make opportunities to talk, Madeline would only say she was tired from her sports teams. She started shutting herself in her room more, and Daryl and I grew concerned. After Madeline returned to her room, leaving Daryl and I alone in the living room, I couldn't help but voice my worries to him. Why do you think she won't talk to us? Am I that unreliable? Sherry, you're a wonderful mother in my eyes. When the time is right, I'm sure she'll open up to us. I wonder if something happened at school, or I'm just as worried as you are. Let's be patient a little longer, Sherry. Encouraged by Daryl's kind words, I resolved to take my time and be there for Madeline. It's a sensitive time, she must be feeling so alone and anxious. Maybe at her age, parents seem annoying, but my feelings for Madeline, my love for her, will never change. Wanting her to feel that, I put in my utmost effort to face Madeline and continue supporting her. Weeks later, Madeline still hadn't regained her cheerfulness. Her face seemed even more strained, as if agonizing over something, and she often lacked focus. I spent my days desperately holding back the urge to pry out of excessive concern. Mom. Madeline came to me in the living room after I finished checking social media and packaging products for online sales. It was already late at night. Normally, Madeline would be asleep in her room at this hour, but that day she came out and approached me. Maybe she was finally ready to confide her troubles. Thinking this, I shook off my sleepiness and had Madeline sit on the sofa for now. What is it, Madeline? It's okay, we have plenty of time, so take your time. Yeah. Madeline fell silent after that, seemingly at a loss for words or unable to muster the courage to speak. It felt like it had been a long time since I properly looked at Madeline face to face like this. Looking closely, there was no trace of her former energetic aura, and her complexion was poor. She often left her dinner unfinished lately and seemed to have lost some weight, so I was desperate to hear the rest of what she had to say. But I held back, knowing that pressing her now would only corner Madeline when she'd finally decided to open up. I waited patiently, gently rubbing Madeline's back. Finally, she opened her mouth heavily. Mom, I'm pregnant. What? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Mom. With trembling hands, Madeline took out a pregnancy test with a positive result. I was completely bewildered by this unbelievable reality. But seeing Madeline tearfully repeating apologies, I realized she must have been suffering alone with this worry for so long, and my heart ached. Madeline. It must have been so hard, keeping this to yourself. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, do you have any idea who? If you're pregnant, then. But no matter how I asked, Madeline only responded with sobs and apologies. I knew I shouldn't rush her, but it was difficult to plan our next steps without knowing the facts. I tried asking every question I could think of. Still, Madeline only trembled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Mom, forgive me. Please don't hate me. It's okay, Madeline. I could never hate you. Madeline seemed to be crushed under the weight of what she had done, hyperventilating to the point where she couldn't give any details. It was late at night and she needed sleep to recover, so I soothed the panicking Madeline to calm her down, deciding to have her explain more at the hospital tomorrow. The next day, I woke up earlier than usual and woke Daryl. What's going on? It's so early in the morning. I'm sorry for the early wake-up call, but there's something important I need to talk to you about. It's about Madeline. As soon as Daryl realized it was about Madeline, he sat up immediately, ready to listen. I need you to stay calm when you hear this. Madeline is pregnant. I just found out in the middle of the night too. I only know the facts, but... Pregnant. You're joking, right? His disbelief was understandable. Daryl's eyes went wide, his voice and lips trembling as he forced the words out. As if to say, surely not our child. I felt the same way. I think Madeline had been agonizing over this for a while. After she told me, she kept apologizing over and over while hyperventilating. You've seen how she's been acting lately, right? Yeah. When Madeline told me, I was extremely shaken up too, all sorts of emotions threatening to explode out of me, but Daryl seemed to be taking the shock even harder than I did. I could tell he was trying his best to listen despite being upset, but it didn't feel like he was just passively taking in my words. Daryl has always been kind-hearted and sensitive by nature. Even without saying it out loud, he was probably imagining how Madeline felt, taking on damage as if it was his own. And as a father, he must have been shocked that his young daughter was pregnant. Until we get more details at the hospital, let's not say anything that might upset Madeline. We're planning to go to the OBGYN in the next town over today. I want you to come with us. Okay. I told him because I felt I couldn't hide the truth, but seeing how shaken and haggard Daryl became filled me with regret for saying anything. But I knew I was doing the right thing. Daryl must be desperately trying to process the reality of the situation. If that was the case, then I needed to take charge with a strong will. I felt bad for my in-laws, but I contacted them to let them know Madeline had suddenly fallen ill and got permission for Daryl and I to take off work. When Madeline woke up, I tried asking her again about the circumstances of her pregnancy, but couldn't get any solid information. Maybe it was hard for her to say in front of her father. With that thought, I simply gave the silent Madeline a gentle hug. As I did that, I realized our departure time was approaching and the three of us left the house. We took a taxi to the nearest train station. When we got to the platform, I realized I had forgotten something critical. I think I forgot Madeline's insurance card. In that case, should I go back and get it? No, you and Madeline wait here on the platform. I'll go grab it and be right back. I could have let Daryl handle it, but I felt uneasy about making the somewhat long walk alone in his current state, unable to hide his fatigue after hearing about Madeline. I didn't want him getting lost in thought and becoming careless. And I couldn't very well make Madeline walk unnecessarily when she looked ill. So I left the two of them on the station platform and headed back home. Our house is a fair distance from the nearest station. If there had been a taxi at the stand outside, I would have taken one, but there wasn't a single car there at a time like this. So I decided to sprint home at full speed. Honestly, I wanted to get Madeline to the OBGYN as soon as possible. As I ran, short of breath, I harshly criticized myself for forgetting something so important. I arrived home, put the insurance card in my wallet and was about to leave when the rarely used landline phone suddenly started ringing. I could have ignored it and rushed to the station, but I felt I had to answer. I dashed to the living room and picked up the phone. The caller was a nurse from the biggest hospital in the area. In a flat tone, she delivered the shocking news that Daryl and Madeline had been taken to the hospital. The hospital staff must have been swamped, because she didn't provide any other information, just telling me to come to the hospital immediately. In a daze, I called a taxi and headed to the hospital where the two of them presumably were. On the way, the taxi driver mentioned there had been a fatal accident on the train tracks halting the trains. Hearing that, I broke out in a cold sweat wondering if the people who jumped might have been Daryl and Madeline. The image of a depressed and unwell Madeline alongside a haggard Daryl, reeling in shock after learning of his daughter's pregnancy. A vivid scenario played out in my mind of these two impulsively jumping onto the tracks together as a train approached. It can't be, I told myself, but once the worst-case scenario popped into my head, it continued smoldering inside me. Please let them be okay. I arrived at the hospital and entered the ER where many nurses and doctors were rushing about in a flurry. Looking a bit further in, I saw the surgery in progress, light glowing red. An ominous feeling stirred up my chest, the negative speculations mocking my wish that I was just overthinking things. I couldn't very well talk to the frantically scurrying nurses, but I also didn't know where to go. As I stood there at a loss, a police officer approached me. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Actually," I explained the series of events that led me here. The officer gave a small nod of understanding. It seemed he had been waiting for me. Then, he began to speak in a heavy tone about what had happened on the station platform with Daryl and Madeline. "Brace yourself for what I'm about to tell you. The truth is..." After that, I was stunned by the revealed facts. Burning with a desire for revenge, I left the hospital alone and returned home. Then, in order to report today's events to my in-laws and family, I had them gather in the living room after closing the shop. "I'm sorry, Jody, Sue. Sylvia, thank you for joining us too." "What on earth is going on?" "I heard Madeline wasn't feeling well and got worried." "You don't think something happened to Madeline, do you?" While Jody and Sue expressed their concern, Sylvia looked bored as she inspected her nails. Her behavior only fueled my anger further, but I had to hold on just a little longer. I would expose her true colors. With that thought in mind, I began to speak, my emotions still running high. "The truth is, Madeline is pregnant. And today, on the way to the obstetrician with the family, she and Daryl jumped in front of a train in an attempted suicide pact." My in-laws were left speechless by my explanation. Their reaction was completely understandable. The shocking nature of my words naturally left them at a loss. However, Sylvia's response was markedly different. Upon hearing the news, she began trembling, a look of panic spreading across her face. Her reaction was exactly as I had anticipated, and I had to stifle the laughter welling up inside me. As Sylvia turned pale and shook, my in-laws tried to calm her, their voices soothing. But Sylvia brushed off their attempts at comfort. "I'm not to blame. I didn't do anything wrong. I would have never imagined they would be jumping in front of a train." With that outburst, she fled from the living room. Jody and Sue watched in bewilderment as Sylvia ran off, clearly having no idea what was happening. "What on earth? What's going on?" Suddenly, an ear-piercing scream rang out, prompting Jody and Sue to jump to their feet and rush out of the living room. There they found Sylvia, collapsed on the ground in shock. Standing before her were Daryl and Madeline, both leveling disgusted glares at Sylvia. "How dare you treat my precious daughter so cruelly? I can't believe it. I trusted you, Auntie. We've already consulted the police about taking appropriate action. You're going to have to take responsibility for what you've done." Left behind by the rapid developments, Jody and Sue stared at me in utter confusion, clearly at a loss. Though my goal had been to expose Sylvia's misdeeds, I had still told a lie that left my in-laws reeling. Feeling the need to apologize and explain the truth, I began to recount what had really happened. When I arrived at the hospital, the police officer informed me that Daryl and Madeline had fallen down a flight of stairs on the train platform. According to eyewitness reports, Madeline had stumbled on the steps, and though Daryl tried to catch her, they both ended up tumbling down. A passerby who saw the accident called for an ambulance and reported the incident to the police. Thanks to their quick action, Daryl and Madeline were rushed to the hospital within minutes of the accident occurring. Though they were both covered in bruises, their lives weren't in danger and hospitalization wouldn't be necessary, much to my relief. The officer who responded to the call was exceptionally kind. Despite having already finished processing the scene, he waited for me, a family member, to arrive at the emergency ward. "You mentioned that your daughter is pregnant. With a fall like that, I'm afraid there's a possibility she may have miscarried." "Oh no. I believe they're running tests now. Please, follow me." The officer led me deep into the emergency ward. where I spotted Daryl and Madeline sitting on chairs in the hallway. I broke into a run, rushing to their side. Madeline! Daryl! Thank goodness! Thank goodness you're all right. Sherry. I'm so sorry for worrying you. Mom! I'm sorry. As I embraced them, I felt the warmth of their bodies and they responded to my frantic questions, bringing tears of relief to my eyes. Daryl's arms and head were wrapped in bandages, but Madeline appeared to be unharmed. While I was relieved by that fact, the officer's words echoed in my mind. To face pregnancy and miscarriage at such a young age was unimaginably cruel. What about the test results? About that. It turns out Madeline wasn't actually pregnant. What? Really? Madeline had apparently been worried about her missed periods. However, the doctor suggested that her young age, sleep deprivation, and stress were likely contributing factors. Her eating habits had also been poor recently, which undoubtedly played a role as well. But the pregnancy test was positive. The doctor thought that was strange too. Madeline, where did you get that pregnancy test? Well, Auntie gave it to me. As soon as she began to explain, tears welled up in Madeline's eyes as a memory seemed to surface. I quickly pulled out a handkerchief and tried to wipe away her tears, but they continued to flow endlessly. Daryl and I listened intently to Madeline's halting, jumbled explanation, trying to piece together what had driven her to such despair. In summary, Madeline had been anxious about missing her period for 2 months. Having never experienced that before, she was filled with unease. Unfortunately, Sylvia found out about her worries. It's not normal to miss your period for 2 months, right? Something must be seriously wrong. Maybe you're sick, or maybe you're pregnant. You're right. I'm really worried. Why don't you take a pregnancy test, just to be sure? I have a few on hand. But I haven't done anything that would get me pregnant. Well, it doesn't hurt to check. Come on, it'll only take a minute. Overwhelmed by Sylvia's forcefulness, Madeline found herself unable to refuse and reluctantly took the test. And the result was positive. Despite not having engaged in any activities that could lead to pregnancy, Madeline was baffled by the test results and went to Sylvia for advice. I took the test, and this is positive, isn't it? Are you serious? Getting pregnant at your age is a disaster. Your life is basically over. I guess school is out of the question now, huh? But I haven't done anything that would get me pregnant. What? The test results don't lie. Do you know how accurate these tests are? 99.9%. That means you're pregnant. What are you going to do now? This is going to cause so much trouble for me and your mom and dad. Oh no! What should I do, Auntie? Though Madeline insisted she had done nothing wrong, Sylvia declared that the test results were absolute. Her expression turned terrifying as she berated Madeline. Panicking and at a loss for what to do, Madeline turned to Sylvia for help. But Sylvia just glared at her with utter revulsion, brushing off her pleas. Getting pregnant in middle school? What is wrong with you? That's disgusting. I can't believe you do something like that when you're so young. You're acting like a total slut. What? You can't even support yourself, and now you're pregnant? This is a serious crime, you know. We've worked so hard to get the store back on its feet, and now your baby is going to ruin everything and maybe even force us to close down. I will never forgive you if that happens. You better figure this out. Rather than providing Madeline with accurate information, Sylvia did nothing but stoke her fears before storming off, leaving Madeline alone to deal with the fallout. Abandoned and directionless, Madeline didn't know what to do. She wanted to reach out for help, but Sylvia's cruel words haunted her, paralyzing her. Madeline was terrified that her own parents, the ultimate authority figures in her life, would react the same way Sylvia had. Unable to voice her fears, she bottled everything up, heaping her troubles to herself. With no friends to confide in, Madeline was left to bear the crushing weight of a potential pregnancy all alone. The emotional strain sapped her energy, robbed her of sleep, and stole her appetite. In fact, it was sleep deprivation and malnourishment that caused the dizziness that sent Madeline tumbling down those fateful stairs. By the time Madeline finished her story, her face was a mess of tears and snot. No child should have to shoulder such a terrible burden alone. I pulled Madeline into a tight embrace. Daryl, having heard everything, was crying too. For a long while, the three of us just held each other. Madeline, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry I didn't notice. Me too. I'm sorry, Madeline. No, it's okay. I could feel you both supporting me, even if I didn't say anything. So, it's not your fault. As we hugged, I noticed Madeline was still crying, her body trembling. It seemed the incident had left her traumatized, and my heart ached for her. I couldn't forgive Sylvia for putting my child through such an ordeal. I told Daryl and Madeline to come home once they had calmed down a bit, then left the hospital on my own. After hearing the whole story, my in-laws turned to face Sylvia, their faces flushed with anger. Sylvia, finding herself without allies, glanced around nervously as she searched for words. About that pregnancy test you gave Madeline. Could it have been a fake? I did some research and found out there are novelty tests designed to always show a positive result. They're mostly sold online. Did you know that? I don't know anything about that. I've never heard of such a thing. Well then, you won't mind showing us your purchase history, right? Why should I have to show you what's on my phone? No way. I'm not letting you snoop through my stuff. If you really didn't know, you wouldn't be so defensive. And you just said you never would have thought to do something like that, didn't you? Sounds to me like you're admitting guilt. I'm telling you, I don't know. Sylvia tried to stand up and run away, but Jody grabbed her and demanded to see her purchase history. It seemed like she couldn't resist anymore. Then, Sylvia, resigned, through the smartphone screen showing the purchase history towards me. I knew it. The screen displayed the record of a pregnancy test kit purchased as a prank. It was clear evidence of what Sylvia had done. Unable to hide it any longer, Sylvia confessed everything. Yes, I did it all. From the start, I couldn't stand Sherry acting all high and mighty after suddenly showing up. So, when I found out about Madeline's irregular periods, I just thought I'd mess with her a little. It was just a joke. Why are you all ganging up on me and complaining? Sylvia's confession revealed her selfish motives. The fact that I had contributed to Custom Tailor's sales and turned the business around. Moreover, through sales activities, I had become friendly with the neighbors and gained more acquaintances. From Sylvia's perspective, it seemed she didn't like that I was getting along better with everyone than she was. Unlike me, who always takes action and tries to interact with people, Sylvia had a passive personality. She had beautiful features and was recognized as a beauty by everyone. That's why Sylvia, who took pride in it, believed that others should always approach her first. She was friendly to those who did something for her, but cold to those who didn't do anything in particular. I think that's where the difference in our popularity stemmed from. What the heck? Just because you're a little good at sales, you're getting carried away. I bet you just asked people for favors, sucked up to them, and got them to praise you. Everyone keeps going on about Sherry, even though you're uglier than me. Hey! How can you say that to Sherry? Sherry has been working hard for our store, desperately coming up with new products and finding sales leads, sacrificing even her sleep. What have you been doing in the meantime? It's all right, Daryl, that's enough. I was furious at Sylvia's words, but this was in front of Madeline. I didn't want to show her a scene of us fighting with foul language. Perhaps sensing that, Daryl suppressed his anger and looked towards the front door. We've called the police too, so we absolutely won't forgive you. There's no need to make such a big deal out of it. Can't you take a joke? I can't believe this. Sylvia, who was taken away by Daryl, was being questioned by the police officer who had rushed over after Daryl's call, while loudly complaining. The officer was different from the one at the hospital, but it seemed like he had been briefed well and had a general grasp of the situation. Perhaps Sylvia was a little intimidated in front of the officer, or maybe she judged that it was better to tell the truth without hiding anything in order to be released quickly, but she honestly admitted the facts. Her tone was very light. Until the very end. It was just meant to be a little joke. It was a joke, so there's no need to apologize. She kept appealing to the officer. Seeing this, my parents-in-law kept apologizing to Madeline and me over and over again. It wasn't my parents-in-law's fault, but no matter how much we told them to stop, they wouldn't listen at all. While we were arguing back and forth, it seemed Sylvia had been released and came back to us. I went through hell. I really can't believe this. Aren't you going to apologize to Madeline and Sherry? That's right. You shameless woman. Do you have any idea how much you hurt Madeline? Huh? I keep telling you. It was just a joke. How many times do I have to say it for you to understand? Sylvia said mockingly, but in the end, there was not a single word of apology. Daryl, who had finished talking to the officer, returned to me with a frustrated look on his face. Judging from his demeanor, I could tell the result was not good. The police officer seemed disappointed too, but he said this case isn't one where an arrest can be made. He did give a stern warning, but it didn't seem like she was willing to listen. I see. I guess that's how it is. Sylvia, who had gotten off with just a warning, was triumphantly complaining. She didn't seem to care at all that she had turned my parents-in-law, me, Daryl, and Madeline against her. I had thought we could at least teach her a little lesson, but in the end, my revenge didn't go well, and I was left just feeling bitter. The next few days, I tried to avoid running into Sylvia as much as possible for Madeline's sake, but I couldn't come to terms with the situation. My in-laws kept apologizing to Madeline and me as always, but that wasn't the point. Why should we, who had done nothing wrong, have to be considerate and feel uncomfortable in our own home? Moreover, Sylvia had started finding fault with me and harassing me at the storefront too. Fortunately, it hadn't escalated thanks to Sue's stern glares, but the resentment was still building up. I couldn't put Madeline at ease here. Having come to that conclusion, I told Daryl that I wanted us to move out of my in-laws' place and build a house for the three of us. Back when Custom Tailor was struggling, there were times I didn't receive a proper salary, so I hadn't been able to save up, but in this rural town, rental properties didn't exist. If we wanted to live here, we needed to build a house. I knew it would be tough, but in order to somehow make it happen, I desperately focused on sales and online marketing. Then, a few months later, just as we were slowly building up funds, Sylvia suddenly abandoned everything, including her job, and casually left home one day. Apparently, the reason was that she had found her destined love. Furious at her utterly selfish reason, my in-laws' anger exploded. After calling her numerous times, When Sylvia finally answered, Jody declared, "You're disowned." He then roughly hung up the phone. A whole year had quickly passed since Sylvia left, and we had been considering moving out of my in-laws' place, but with Sylvia's sudden disappearance, we were still living with them. Business was still going great, and every day was consumed by work. I had almost completely forgotten about Sylvia's existence. Then, one evening, the house phone rang. Wondering who it could be at this hour, I watched as Jody, who was nearby, answered the call. Picking up the receiver, Jody let out a big sigh and furrowed his brow.
"Hey! The house is gone! What's going on?"
Hearing the familiar loud voice leaking out from the phone, Daryl and I, who were there, exchanged surprised looks. We had never dreamed that Sylvia would call. But Jody had a calm demeanor, as if he had known a call would come someday.
"We sold the house a long time ago." "Huh? I never heard about that. Tell me where you moved."
"Why would I tell you?
You're no longer a part of our lives."
In fact, about 6 months after Sylvia left, we had moved to the city. It was my in-laws who had suggested it. I didn't know the full circumstances, but there was no way someone with Sylvia's personality could live harmoniously with a man. My in-laws had been wary that someday, Sylvia would be kicked out and come back in a pinch.
"What are you saying?" "The store. You have the store, don't you? You'll be in trouble if I don't take it over for you. I haven't forgiven you for calling custom tailors' work outdated and a garbage business. I'd rather close the store than have you take over."
Jody was so enraged like I had never seen before. Just like Daryl, he was usually gentle, and I had rarely seen him angry. For Jody to raise his voice this much, it must be quite serious. Still, I was surprised to hear that she had declared custom tailors' work to be an outdated garbage business in the past. Thinking about how my in-laws had forgiven such a worthless daughter and had continued on without abandoning her all this time, I couldn't hold back my tears.
"I'll say it one more time. You're disowned. Don't ever show your face in front of us again." "Wait a minute. I'm in a really tough spot right now. Money. I need money. Come on, Dad, help me out."
Before Sylvia could finish talking, Jody had hung up the phone, so I couldn't hear any more of her words after that. I could tell she had tried to win him over with tears at the end, but I wasn't sure how that pleading voice sounded to Jody. Jody's back after hanging up the phone was indescribably lonely, and I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Daryl gently patted my shoulder as I stood there at a loss for words. Far away from our hometown where the store used to be, we had no idea what became of Sylvia and were once again caught up in our busy daily lives. However, a few months later, while minding the store with Sue, a couple who were acquaintances of my in-laws from far away came to visit. This couple had continued to buy our products back when the store was on the verge of closing down. They had been purchasing through mail order for a while, but they had apparently come to see us while on a trip. And it was from this couple that I heard about Sylvia's current situation. It seemed that when Sylvia found out she had lost her house, she went around approaching anyone she could find in the neighborhood. Since it was a small rural area, Sylvia's misdeeds were already known to all the residents, and far from lending a helping hand, there was not a single person who even offered her kind words. A shameless woman who had hurt a girl of marriageable age with an unethical prank and remained defiant even to the police. She was apparently living her days with people talking behind her back. Even for Sylvia, living in that small town with no allies must have been uncomfortable. And as for Sylvia's partner, about whom we hadn't known the details, it turned out to be a man from the bar she frequented. Sylvia had become infatuated with a man at a certain bar a few train stations away from her hometown. Confident in her own beauty, Sylvia had no doubt that the man at the bar was in love with her. To make the barman even more crazy about her, she had poured in large sums of money and even used up all her savings. After leaving home, she had apparently been frequenting the bar, barely working and accumulating debt. But such a lifestyle couldn't continue forever, and when she reached a point where she couldn't repay her debts or borrow more money, she seemed to have sought help from the man she was so invested in. The man himself was questionable, but that was her own fault. After being swiftly dumped by a woman who was only beautiful and had recklessly created debt, she was apparently struggling to repay her loans without even receiving help. With no place to live, Sylvia was forced to live on the streets for a while. However, the residents, thinking it would be troublesome if she suddenly turned up dead after being on the streets for a long time, had Sylvia live in a dilapidated house with a hole in the roof that could hardly be called clean. And now, even in her hardship, unable to honestly work, Sylvia was apparently clutching her remaining money, riding the train, and trying to seduce any man who looked wealthy. And using the pregnancy test that would absolutely show a positive result, which she had given to Madeline, she was reportedly informing her numerous partners with whom she had physical relations that she was pregnant and demanding marriage or child support payments. I was astounded that she was still targeting rich men at this point, but apparently, that strategy had yet to succeed, and she was often seen returning to the rundown house in her hometown, exhausted. The area around her hometown was by no means urban, so Sylvia's bad reputation had spread in no time. There was a terrible woman, beautiful but threatening pregnancy to demand marriage and child support. As such rumors spread, it had apparently become difficult for her to even seduce men recently. Even when she occasionally succeeded in bringing a man home, she would end up having her money taken and only wearing herself down, according to the couple who visited the store. Having lost a home to return to and unable to maintain the beauty she had absolute confidence in, Sylvia's state must be quite unseemly. Having achieved revenge in an unexpected way, I felt a little lighter in my heart. It was a shame I couldn't see it with my own eyes, but I couldn't even spare the time to go see how Sylvia was doing now. She really is a hopeless child as always, causing trouble for everyone. Sue. Although she had declared Sylvia disowned, just like Jody, the inherently kind Sue seemed to be pained by Sylvia's current situation. She also seemed concerned about causing trouble for the former neighborhood residents, but the couple who visited the store laughed, saying it made for a good topic of conversation. After chatting for a bit, they purchased a few new products and left. Changing the subject, the reason my in-laws had suggested moving was that I had mentioned our past efforts to save up funds to move out of their house to avoid Sylvia. I had meant it as a casual conversation, but my in-laws said they would both contribute money to build a new home on a new piece of land. They had apparently also been considering relocating to a more convenient location for a long time and had been saving up. Thanks to that, we were able to build a better house than expected, with a factory next to the store-cum house. The craftsmen were all people who had fallen for my in-laws' character after overcoming the difficult times together, so they followed us to the distant new location. Recently, young apprentices who have been inspired by the quality of the products here have started joining us, saying they want to learn the techniques, and our whole family has begun working on passing down the tradition. There may still be a long way to go, but I feel a strong sense of fulfillment in this work. Ever since Madeline stopped the irregular lifestyle that the doctor had warned her about, perhaps because she has no stress, her menstrual cycle has returned to normal, and she seems to be getting along well with the friends she made at her new school. Moreover, Madeline has recently developed a strong interest in fashion and has started thinking about creating original designs for clothes, scarves, and such. Her design approach from a perspective that we don't have is full of new discoveries. Every day is so busy that I have no time to rest, but I felt fulfilled. I want to work hard to further expand the company and spread the appeal of custom tailor to many more people.
Use common sense. She's a fake mom.
I was at a loss for words. Why did I have to be subjected to such harsh words? My husband William's son, Joseph, had recently been accepted into a prestigious medical school. I had decided to cover the enrollment fee and had just returned from the bank. Upon returning, I tried on the suit I had prepared for the entrance ceremony to show them, and that's when it happened. Their reactions were dismissive. William frowned, and Joseph clearly looked displeased. I couldn't understand why. Being called a fake, I felt as if thorns were deeply embedded in me.
That's right. The fake mom shouldn't come to the entrance ceremony.
In my despair, I couldn't retort. Who could have predicted that the family I decided to love would betray me so easily? It's not something that can be summed up with just sad. Since then, every day seemed to fade in color. On the day of the entrance ceremony, I didn't go and left the suit in my room as I went out. At that moment, my mobile phone started ringing. It was William.
Hey, what's this all about? You liar!
He shouted at me. The truth, which I myself was unaware of, was soon to be revealed by the person next to me. My name is Patricia. I am 51 years old and single. All my friends are married, and some even have children who are now 18. Lately, as they finished raising their children, I started going to cafes more often with my friends who now had free time. Listening to their stories, I found them endearing or tough at times. But everyone doesn't seem much different. Walking back from the cafe, I muttered and pondered alone. If I had a husband and children, how would I be spending my time now? Would I be reflecting on the tough and happy moments of parenting, just like my friends? However, I don't dwell on it too much, even though I'm not married. What I think about now are my deceased parents. My dad had been ill since he was young. Even when treatment was tough, he always smiled kindly, like the sun. Even when he became bedridden, he continued his hobby of reading and sometimes gave me book recommendations. My dad passed away when I was 30, and I cried with my mom. After losing my dad, I became lethargic and shocked for a while. It seems my mom felt the same. After my dad's death, she suddenly became very forgetful, and the house became a mess. Mom should have been tidy, but something was off. Thinking this, I persuaded her to go to the hospital, where we were told she was starting to show signs of dementia. Living alone, I immediately moved back to my parents' home to take care of Mom. From then on, I spent my days facing Mom and her dementia. Mom would start looking for the trash I had thrown away. Even though no one had visited, she would repeatedly open the front door, saying someone had come. At times, she would even become sad over the death of a cat we never owned. Mom and I spent a tumultuous 20 years, not knowing what was what. And just recently, Mom passed away. In the midst of my loss, I finished the funeral and started to sort through her belongings. It wasn't something that could be finished in a day or two, so I proceeded little by little, taking breaks. Opening a window, I looked up at the sky. The clear winter sky was mixed with the breeze of spring. It had been a while since I felt the flow of the seasons. Maybe I've been too tense up until now. Taking a deep breath, I stood in the kitchen to make some coffee. At that moment, the doorbell rang. It was a resident of the apartment and a friend of Mom's. Before my parents passed away, I had inherited an old apartment and had been the owner since my 30s. Because of this, I was close with the residents. They were all friendly, nice people who would share fruits and vegetables with me. The apartment was about a 10-minute walk from my parents' home. The fact that she had come all the way here meant there might have been some trouble. Feeling slightly anxious, I went out to see, but that wasn't the case. She had heard about Mom's passing and came to check on me, worried. She was about the same age as Mom and had been very close to her. I answered with a forced smile.
I'm okay. I knew this day would come eventually. But you seem to have been down lately. I'm really okay.
I was also taken care of by your mom.
Yes, I know.
Her eyes were swollen from crying, truly mourning. We reminisced and promised to visit the grave together sometime. If there were people who cherished her like this, Mom would have been happy. Suddenly, I remembered something. The apartment nearby has to be demolished. A city development project was decided, and the area where the apartment now stands is to be turned into a road.
That's 5 years from now.
While drinking coffee, I absent-mindedly stared at the calendar on the table. Within these 5 years, I need to have the residents relocate and find a demolition contractor. A part of the cost will be covered by the city if I apply. Still, the idea of demolishing it is somewhat reluctant. To outsiders, it may seem like an old apartment, but it holds sentimental value for me. Frozen water pipes, clogged toilets, noise complaints. Looking back, there were many difficulties. There were issues I couldn't solve alone, but with my parents' help or by consulting professionals, we somehow managed. Spending days looking at paint samples for the exterior walls is also a fond memory.
It's a shame, but it has to be demolished.
The residents need time to find a new place to live. I'll make a notice soon. Losing Mom and having to let go of that apartment was incredibly sad. To distract myself from those feelings, I quickly finished my coffee. Then, without spending too much time on sorting through her belongings, I began to create the notice. The apartment residents came to visit me almost every day. Everyone was worried about me. Those who had known me longer would reminisce about memories with Mom. Of course, even those who hadn't known us as long would start conversations. Lately, I've been talking a lot with William Miller, who moved in about a year ago. He chose this apartment because the rent was cheaper than the surrounding market rates. He lives with his son, Joseph, and mentioned how education costs a lot of money.
It must have been hard. Well, it can't be helped. Mom is probably laughing in heaven now. You're strong. I lost my wife a few years ago, and it was hard to recover.
Oh, was that so?
Yes, she was ill, with a troublesome, incurable disease.
Was she hospitalized?
She wasn't, but I took care of her at home. It must have been difficult with Joseph around. Taking care of my wife while cooking and attending school events for him was hard.
His smiling face didn't show any of the hardships. Maybe that's part of his charm. Moreover, he always entertained me with his interesting stories. Talking with William made the sadness of losing Mom and having to demolish the apartment seem to disappear. Gradually, I realized I was becoming attracted to him. Even when shopping, I found myself wondering what William's favorite dishes were.
Oh, what am I thinking?
I made a gesture of brushing something away from my face, trying not to think about it any further.
I'm in my 50s. I should be focusing on being responsible, not on romance.
That's what I told myself. However, whenever I saw William, we would have fun talking again, and my resolve would waver. Before long, William and I had become closer than before. One sunny day, William came to me with a serious look. He said he had something to talk about, so I decided to stay home that day to listen. Maybe he had come to talk about moving out soon after seeing the notice. As we sat facing each other, nervously, he began. Actually, the thing is...
What's wrong? You're so formal all of a sudden.
Well, I've liked you for a long time now. Slowly, he took out a small case from his pocket. As he opened the lid, he said to me, "Will you marry me?" Inside was a very elegant ring shining brightly.
Me? Are you sure?
I was so surprised I had to do a double take. I thought it might be a mistake or a joke, but it seemed not. William leaned in and said, "Patricia, you're so calm, yet you look so happy when we talk. I want to be with you for the rest of my life."
But I'm already 51.
Age doesn't matter. I don't choose people based on something like that. William said to me with a serious look. Marriage is about life. I want you to be the person who lives and shares that life with me. William. But maybe it's not okay because I have a child. That's not true. I like you, William. So, I accepted his proposal and we decided to get married. That night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, I never dreamed something like this would happen at this point in my life. Life is full of surprises. While looking at my sagging arms, I wondered if I could even wear a wedding dress. For a few days, that thought consumed me until William came with good news. Joseph had been accepted into a prestigious medical school.
Oh, congratulations.
Really, it's such a relief. He was so nervous during the exams, now we can finally relax.
Should we celebrate? Maybe order some food?
Well, there's a bit of a problem.
What is it?
Actually, even though he got accepted, we can't afford the enrollment fee and tuition. Medical school is quite expensive.
That's terrible.
We need to figure out the enrollment fee by the deadline at least. Seeing him so genuinely troubled made me worry too. Without a solution, Joseph couldn't enroll in medical school. If only I had been more responsible. William clenched his fist, frustration seeping through. Joseph has been saying since Mom got sick that he's going to cure her. That's why he aimed for medical school. I didn't know how much it would cost to attend medical school. I couldn't cover the full amount, but maybe I could manage the enrollment fee. Actually, I can cover the enrollment fee.
Really?
His expression brightened instantly. Yes. After all, we're family now, aren't we? Thank you. Thank you. This way, Joseph can become a great doctor. Please don't cry so much. Let's support Joseph together. Later, I asked for the exact amount of the enrollment fee and started arranging the transfer. Actually, I was receiving a displacement allowance from the city for demolishing the apartment. I checked my balance and told William and Joseph that the enrollment fee seemed manageable.
That's great. Thank you, Patricia. No, Mom.
I'm so relieved.
All right, enough of that. Let's start our celebration dinner. Congratulations on your acceptance, Joseph. This looks delicious. Let's eat.
As they joyfully ate, saying how delicious it was, I felt like I was looking at my own son, which made me incredibly happy. Thinking about starting a new life with these two wonderful people made me feel much more positive. I felt motivated to do my best for this new family. The next day, after confirming the details of the destination account, I went to the bank. There were few customers that day, and I was called almost immediately after taking a number. As I approached the counter, I made eye contact and exchanged a light greeting with someone in the back. It was Mr. Davis, the branch manager. He stopped what he was doing and came over to me when he noticed me. It's been a while. How have you been since we last spoke? Fine, thank you. I've received a lot of help from you before. I had received assistance from Mr. Davis regarding the apartment and other assets. We've had a long relationship, spanning about 20 years. When Mom passed away, he was very supportive, something I vividly remember. Mr. Davis was highly regarded by my dad as a smart and dependable person.
What brings you in today?
I showed him my bank account and the details of the destination for the transfer.
Actually, I've recently decided to get married. I'm here to transfer enrollment fees for my stepchild.
Oh, that's wonderful news. At least, that's what I expected him to say, but he didn't. Instead, he looked slightly troubled, glancing between the transfer details and me.
May I have a word with you about this?
Both the teller and I, puzzled, followed Mr. Davis. We were led to a small room at the back of the bank, the same place we'd discussed inheritance matters before. Mr. Davis, looking at the transfer details, asked me, "This is for medical school, correct? The son aims to become a doctor?"
Yes, that's what I've been told.
Excuse me, but could you tell me how you came to marry your husband?
Excuse me?
Caught off guard, I nevertheless decided to be frank. I talked about how, after losing Mom, I became closer to William, a resident of the apartment I managed. About how William had cared for his terminally ill wife while raising his son alone. And that his wife had passed away a few years ago, leaving him living with his son. That he proposed because he wanted to spend his life with me. And then, right after that, the issue of Joseph's enrollment fees came up.
I felt like I could really make an effort for our new family.
That's truly wonderful. But this William person.
Oh, my husband's name is William Miller.
William Miller? He repeated the name softly, then tapped his fingers on the desk as if pondering. After a few seconds, he stopped tapping and said, "May I handle this matter?"
But...
Please, leave it to me. He stood up with a smile. Then, opening the door.
Please.
He ushered me out. I left the bank, still confused about what had just transpired. On my way home, I thought about Mr. Davis. He had looked a bit troubled when he heard William's name. Why, I wonder. But I trust him. He's always been dependable, and there's never been a time he hasn't come through when he said he'd handle something. There's still time before the deadline, so it should be fine. I decided to leave everything in Mr. Davis's hands. That night, I tried on the suit I had prepared for the entrance ceremony in front of William and his son. It was a beautiful white suit.
How do I look, you too?
However, their response was cold.
Did you buy that?
Are you really coming to the entrance ceremony? William frowned, and Joseph clearly looked displeased. I didn't understand why.
Is it not okay?
It's not about being okay. Think about it logically. You're a fake mom. My heart skipped a beat. Being called a fake, I felt as if thorns were deeply embedded in me.
That's right, Patricia. A fake mom shouldn't come to the entrance ceremony.
Fake ones shouldn't come to the entrance ceremony. I was speechless. Why did I have to be subjected to such harsh words? As I was about to lose consciousness, William sighed deeply. Let's just tell the truth.
The truth?
What do you think was the reason we were nice to you?
It's for the money. For my enrollment fee and tuition. I can't believe it.
You have no other merits to marry someone like you.
What do you mean? Was it all an act?
Yes, it was. It took a long time to get close to you, a heartbroken person, and secure a marriage. I would have preferred a younger and more beautiful mom. We thought, being the owner of the apartment and having inherited a lot from your parents, you had plenty of assets. Would have been nice if you paid for the whole tuition too. Disappointing. Can't believe you only paid the enrollment fee.
There has to be a limit.
So, it's over. No more pretending to be a family.
We'll stop being nice.
They laughed loudly. Not understanding what was so funny, I stood there, stunned. In my despair, I couldn't retort. This white suit now seemed like a symbol of my solitary excitement. Who could have predicted such an easy betrayal by the family I decided to love? It's not something that can be summed up with just sad. Their laughter echoed in my ears, and I covered them to block out the sound. From that day on, I was continually ignored by them, even though I was right there. It was as if I didn't exist. Such experiences had worn me down. Thinking about the future filled my nights with anxiety and sleeplessness, making it hard to find rest. Days passed in a blur of sleep deprivation until the day of the entrance ceremony arrived. That day, I didn't go to the ceremony and left the suit in my room as I went out. Wandering the streets, I regretted my naive actions. Why did I believe their words so blindly? It was my fault for not doubting them. How should I deal with those two from now on? That's all I could think about. Then, suddenly, I felt someone tap my shoulder and call my name. Turning around, there was Mr. Davis, smiling.
I saw you just now. What's wrong?
I couldn't possibly tell him I was deceived by my spouse and his son. I awkwardly looked away. Just then, my mobile phone started ringing. It was William.
Excuse me, I need to take this call.
I excused myself to Mr. Davis and pressed the answer button. William shouted at me.
What the hell is this? You liar. What? At the entrance ceremony registration, they said my enrollment has been canceled because the $20,000 enrollment fee hasn't been paid. That's ridiculous. Explain this.
He was ranting over the phone. Indeed, that day I went to the bank and left this matter in Mr. Davis's hands. As I was puzzled, Mr. Davis next to me offered his help.
Let me explain.
He took my mobile phone, switched it to speaker, and started talking.
Hello, William Miller. I'm Davis, a banker from around here. What? You were involved in a scandal in another town before, weren't you? Accused of embezzling company funds.
Mr. Davis spoke plainly and clearly.
What are you talking about? You fled here from your hometown.
I was quite surprised.
Hey, don't talk nonsense about Dad. It would have been better if it were nonsense, but it was a big scandal back then, and I remember it well. Stop it! After all, it was an embezzlement case that even involved our bank due to our business dealings with that company.
It's hard to forget. Mr. Davis's smile vanished, replaced by a stern expression as he recalled the past.
I remembered your name. When Patricia mentioned your name, I was suspicious. What? Patricia, what did you tell him? I heard you got married. Admirable how quickly you moved on after getting divorced. Divorced? You said she died. Was that a lie too? It wasn't a terminal illness, and the death was a lie. You were served divorce papers because of that scandal. Shut up. Just send the enrollment fee. You approached kind Patricia, pretending to be a struggling single father, planning to get money out of her, didn't you? Shut up. It's none of your business. Hey, Patricia. Don't believe a word he says. It's all lies. No. The lies are all yours.
The day I went to the bank, I realized I had forgotten something on my way home and had to return. That's when I met Mr. Davis again. He mentioned he had some concerns about William and asked if we could delay the transfer a bit. Believing Mr. Davis, since there was still time until the payment deadline, I left the money in my bank account. I had told them I went to the bank, which led them to mistakenly believe I had made the transfer. I never said I had sent the money. That night, after showing them the suit, I discovered their true nature and intentions. It was then I understood why Mr. Davis wanted to wait before making the transfer. Today, I was on my way to the bank to clarify everything. I hadn't expected to run into him in the middle of the street, but hearing everything confirmed my suspicions.
I kept asking William and Joseph to talk to me, What's with the suddenness?
But they both ignored me, unaware that I hadn't made the transfer. William and Joseph were silent on the other end of the phone. Confronted with the truth by both Mr. Davis and me, they were rendered speechless. A few seconds later, the call ended and only ambient noise filled the air. After that day, the divorce between William and me was swiftly finalized. With everything exposed and his understanding of my financial status, William probably decided it was time to cut his losses. I never expected the smiling facade he presented to be just that, a facade. He and Joseph fled, leaving not just my apartment but also the town. Joseph's behavior had been problematic, often causing trouble at school. Though his academic performance was good, which is probably why his teachers overlooked his issues. Looking at their vacated room, I reflected on such rumors. Can such things really happen? It felt like something out of a drama or manga, with stories too bizarre to discern as truth or fiction. Yet, there was the undeniable fact of his capability to get accepted into a prestigious medical school. I regretted that such intellect couldn't have been applied more constructively. I've had enough of marriage. Years later, my apartment was to be rebuilt nearby, just a few minutes' walk from its original location. On the day I posted the notice about the apartment, I also went to the municipal office to discuss the displacement fee. That's when an error was discovered in the construction blueprints for the development project. The development area was reviewed, and it turned out that only a slight adjustment to the apartment's location was necessary. Both I and the residents were surprised and pleased by this turn of events. Though the reconstruction took time, it was completed sooner than expected. Taking this opportunity, the plumbing and other facilities were completely updated. However, I wondered if the residents would choose to stay. As I observed, it seemed they were willing to remain.
Sorry to trouble you a bit longer.
A friend of Mom's, who had made plans with me to visit her grave in remembrance, said this with a smile. Now, we visit the grave together once or twice a year and have meals together, enjoying a close relationship. Everyone moved to the new apartment smoothly, and the relocation proceeded without issues. The development also progressed, changing not just the apartment but the surrounding ambience. The creation of new roads was welcomed by delivery personnel for easier access. Going to the nearby supermarket became more convenient with the wider roads. The atmosphere seemed to brighten a bit. Exchanging greetings with the apartment residents remained unchanged. Everyone was still friendly and pleasant. Life is unpredictable, isn't it? My quiet murmur dissolved into the clear blue sky. I'm taking the air, the young master. Here's your settlement, $10,000. As she threw the wad of cash at me, my best friend Amanda burst out laughing. Clutching her stomach, she seemed genuinely amused from the bottom of her heart. James is crazy about me.
He said you're just a plain, uninteresting woman.
I see. I gave a small nod. I had a feeling that was the case. My marriage to my husband James was not a love match. It was simply because James' father William, the chairman of a major corporation, took a liking to me and made me James' wife. Given James' personality, a woman like me must bore him to death. In contrast, Amanda has a glamorous appearance and is fun to talk to. I can understand why James likes her.
Hey, don't you want the money?
Amanda grinned, as if dangling bait in front of a stray dog. But she wasn't the only one who started laughing. The lawyer who had been silent beside me also burst into loud laughter, pointing at Amanda. My name is Dorothy. I was originally a doctor working at a hospital, but the chairman recognized my work ethic and I became his son's wife. That was 2 years ago. My husband James takes advantage of being the son of a major corporation and spends his time playing around. On paper, he has the same title of doctor as me, but I've never seen him actually treating patients.
What's wrong?
Sighing like that. It's nothing. One time, I was on the phone with my best friend Amanda while doing household chores. As I made stew in a pot, I said,
"The chairman, my father-in-law William, is coming over tonight. But James is so caught up in his playtime that he shows no sign of coming home on time. That's definitely not good."
On the other end of the line, Amanda's voice turned grim.
"I'd go look for him, but I'm not done cooking yet."
Wait a second.
Amanda sounded surprised.
Doesn't the housekeeper do the cooking?
That's how it appears to the world, but the reality is different.
I replied with a sigh. James had hired a housekeeper when he was single, and he left everything, not just cooking, to the housekeeper to take care of his personal affairs. But after marrying me, James fired that housekeeper, and so he pushed all the household chores onto me, his wife.
"You'd be bored staying home all the time, right?"
he would say with a sneer. I was perplexed. Because I had intended to continue working as a doctor after getting married. But in reality, I'm so swamped with housework that I can't leave the house. Living in a high-rise apartment may look like a dream from the outside. But the truth is, it's like being a caged bird.
"I thought you'd be living a better life. But you haven't told James' dad about this?"
How could I possibly tell him? Even if he's such a philanderer to William, James is his only son. William doesn't know the reality of our married life. So even now, thinking it's for James' livelihood, he sends money to hire a housekeeper. But all that money vanishes into funds for James to play around with.
"Getting married to someone favored by the parents sure has its hardships too,"
Amanda murmured, sounding conflicted.
"You never know what kind of man you'll end up with until you're actually married. And Dorothy ended up with a real dud in terms of character."
Her voice was mixed with pity and exasperation. Since my student days, I had been indifferent to romance. Knowing this, Amanda was likely thinking to herself, Dorothy had no eye for men. In fact, Amanda started saying things like this.
"I wouldn't make that kind of mistake though." "Mistake? You gotta do your research before dating someone. Men put on an act, so you can't be fooled by their nice demeanor."
Her tone was slightly condescending. We've known each other since our student days, but Amanda has this side to her. According to her, since she was born 2 months earlier, she's the senior one. But at the same time, her advice is often off the mark, including this time.
"William kept pushing ahead with the wedding preparations, so I wasn't in a position to say I wanted to break it off." "You thought about breaking it off?"
Amanda asked, sounding surprised. That's right. I had no intention of marrying James. Having stated that fact aloud myself, I was made aware of it anew.
"Why didn't you break it off then?"
Amanda, who likes to pry despite not grasping the essence of things. The stew was ready. Turning off the heat, I continued speaking.
"I felt like we weren't a good match."
"What?"
"So, the moment I met James, I knew I couldn't fall in love with him."
I confessed straightforwardly. At that moment, a brief silence falls. The one to break the silence was Amanda.
"You mean like intuition?"
I guess so.
"Anyway, it wasn't about his looks or personality or anything like that. I just felt James and I weren't suited to be husband and wife."
How luxurious, Amanda said with a groan.
"Then you should have given that marriage proposal to me."
I really should have. They both like flashy things, so surely Amanda and James would make a better match. Imagining it made me a little envious.
"Oh, William will be here soon, so I need to set out the food."
"Wow, sounds rough."
After a deflated response, we end the call. Everyday life immediately resumes. James doesn't come back. With no choice, I welcome William alone.
Is James not here?
Seems he's busy with work. I have no choice but to fib. In terms of education and job title, James is an outstanding person. The reality is he pushes work onto his subordinates and doesn't even show up to the office, but William doesn't know that. So even now, he praises the food I made like this.
It's a shame I can't directly thank the person who made this meal. I'll pass along the message.
Suppressing my welling frustration, I reply. William smiles and says to me,
Then please tell them this. Thank you always for taking care of my son, and the food was delicious.
Certainly. Nodding, I secretly clench my fist. Those words should rightfully be directed at me. Later on, it seems Amanda made contact with James. Her first words over the phone were,
Dorothy's husband is handsome, huh? You met James? I mean, from what I heard, he sounds like an awful husband, right? That actually made me curious.
It was an opinion typical of Amanda with her strong curiosity. Dismayed, I still wait for her next words.
His personality didn't seem that bad, but his fake pleasantry smile was definitely suspicious. That was clearly an act. You can tell from a smile?
Hearing that, Amanda's voice took on a proud tone. I can tell. Well, there are a few other tricks too. In that manner, Amanda went on a one-sided spiel about her assessment of James, and then the call ended. In the now quiet room, I think to myself, Amanda met James. That was all there was to it. But for some reason, that fact caught in my chest and raised questions. I recall a feeling I had before. That James and Amanda would surely make a good match. No way. Shaking off the bad premonition, I returned to the housework. A housewife doesn't have the luxury to indulge in sentimentality. Even in my doctor days there were physically demanding aspects, but on top of that, housework includes manual labor too. However, this is something other housewives won't accept even if I tell them.
What? Manual labor is something the husband should do, no?
The neighborhood ladies said with a laugh, and in the first place, many families living in this class of high-rise employ housekeepers. Not being understood is painful too, huh? Once again, my hand wiping the window stops. I notice tears have welled up in my eyes.
What are you doing? Huh?
A voice from behind startles me. Looking at the clock, it was already time for James to come home. Although usually he's too absorbed in his playtime and doesn't return until late at night. Today of all days, he seems to have properly come home on time. Loosening his tie, James says,
Is dinner ready?
Sorry, I forgot. Saying that, I dash to the kitchen. Just as I'm about to open the fridge, James says in a bothered tone,
Never mind. Let's eat out today. Anything you want to eat?
Not really.
Then the nearby restaurant is fine.
Saying that brusquely, James took me to a high-end restaurant. Normally a reservation would be required, but James is a regular, so they make an exception for him.
This is the restaurant where you proposed to me.
Suddenly feeling nostalgic, I mention it. Is that so? His voice feigning ignorance makes me give a wry smile. Thinking he must be embarrassed, I look at his face. In that instant, disappointment flashed through my mind. James doesn't seem to remember proposing to me. With a surprised look, he says,
Didn't Dad just bring the marriage certificate and it was over once we signed it?
Maybe so. Still crestfallen, I nod. That's not true. I wasn't keen on this marriage. So I had intended to find a chance to confess my true feelings to James. I thought even William would reconsider if he heard from James that he wanted to call off the engagement. However, right before that, James called me out to this restaurant and proposed. I was shocked. It was unexpected and made me happy too. So I accepted this marriage. And yet, James, the key person, has completely forgotten about it.
Come to think of it, I met someone today who said she was your friend.
You mean Amanda?
Yeah, that was her name.
James nodded as if confirming his own memory. She was beautiful. Wasn't she?
Oh, I was surprised. She had a youthfulness that belied being over 30.
James said, sounding impressed. I figured as much. Amanda is single, but it's not like men don't hit on her. Rather the opposite, she's always blessed with new boyfriends. What did you two talk about?
Well, she got mad at me, telling me not to trouble my best friend so much.
James lowered his eyes, looking uncomfortable. That gesture was boyish and somehow charming. However, that wasn't the important part.
Amanda, what have you done? Dorothy?
Though James seemed puzzled, I was too preoccupied to care. I had told Amanda not to tell anyone. Yet she apparently shared my complaints about him to James himself of all people. You don't need to mind what Amanda said. But...
Excuse me, valued customers.
The restaurant staff approached.
We request that you please keep your voices down. Oh, okay.
Taking the opportunity of being warned, we placed our order. The chef's recommended course, it was the restaurant's signature course, with the dishes determined by the ingredients procured that day. I wonder what will come out today.
Who knows?
I excitedly awaited the food. However,
excuse me. Is there a problem?
The staff remained unperturbed, but my face had likely turned somewhat pale. What was brought out was a course meal for one person.
I'm the worst as a husband, huh?
James said as he started eating. I hurriedly denied his words. I didn't say that much. I did grumble a bit, but Amanda's way of speaking involves exaggeration. Don't take it seriously.
So it's true that you complained?
Hanging my head, I reply. Yes.
You can't even satisfactorily handle a single household chore, can you? Today I just happened to forget, that's all.
I always properly make meals and wait for James to come home. However, usually even if the food gets cold, James doesn't return, so I eat alone and warm up James' portion in the microwave for him to eat later. Day after day of that. It certainly lacked fulfillment. So unintentionally, I forgot to make dinner today. To be told I'm habitually neglecting housework as a result is disheartening.
I was wrong to forget to cook and to complain about you to a friend. But I don't recall deserving this treatment. We need to be quiet in this restaurant.
Ignoring my side of the story, James said that. I silently waited for James to finish eating, desperately enduring the rumbling of my empty stomach, lest I let my guard down. On the way home, despite sitting in the passenger seat, James felt so distant. In reality, his feelings had likely long since left me. While driving, James spoke.
You said it was fine to give me to Amanda, didn't you?
That's dash. That's not something I brought up. Amanda had merely said it as a joke. Before I knew it, all of Amanda's words were being twisted in a way unfavorable to me. It couldn't be that Amanda. I shake my head, denying the worst possibility. No way, because Amanda has been my best friend since our student days. She would never betray me. I desperately try to convince myself of that. However, immediately after, James said, "Can we break up?"
What?
I've decided to remarry Amanda, you see. The car stops. A figure swiftly gets into the back seat. My heart leaps. There's no mistake. The one who got in was Amanda. casually crossing her legs in the seat, she says.
James told you, right? If you get it, then get out of the car. No way!
Stunned speechless, the two repeatedly told me to get out of the car. Overwhelmed by the pressure, I ended up exiting the vehicle. The car immediately speeds off. Left behind on the dark road, I stand there in a daze for a while. By the time I come to my senses, I had started crying. With a hoarse voice dried out from tears, I call a friend. Thomas? Due to circumstances, I can't go home. Come pick me up.
What's that about?
My friend Thomas didn't seem to grasp the situation well. Even so, he apparently sensed from my tearful voice that it wasn't an ordinary occurrence.
Got it. I'll come get you right away.
Please. Ending the call, I crouched at the side of the road. Eventually, a single car arrives.
Dorothy.
Thank you, Thomas. By Thomas's car, I was somehow able to return to my parents' home. During the ride, Thomas didn't ask me about the circumstances. My parents were shocked to see me with eyes swollen from crying.
Dorothy, what on earth happened?
Actually, I began to explain the situation bit by bit. When she finished, Dad stood up, furious.
I'm going to James' parents right now to settle this. Calm down.
Thomas, the only one keeping his composure, tried to soothe Dad. Thomas was a lawyer. He likely judged that acting rashly would put me at a disadvantage.
Can you let me handle this?
Thomas, thank you. I'm counting on you. I replied, wiping away her tears. Just 3 days later, divorce papers arrived from James.
What a jerk!
Dad was angry, but James didn't marry me because he loved me in the first place. Rather than continuing a sham marriage, maybe it was better to separate, I thought. But what worried me was my best friend, Amanda. Amanda seemed intent on kicking me out and becoming James' new wife herself. In other words, the words I thought were a joke were Amanda's true feelings.
Amanda, you betrayed me.
She must have been enamored with the wealthy James over our long friendship. If that's the case, there's nothing I can do about it.
Thomas, I'm leaving this matter to you.
Got it. Together with Thomas, I headed to James' high-rise apartment. The place was overflowing with Amanda's belongings. Amanda sat on the sofa, buried in designer handbags. Well, look who's here.
I have something to discuss too. Oh, really?
Amanda feigned surprise. James stood against the wall, glaring at Thomas. He had disliked the elite Thomas for a while now. James likely felt inferior, knowing he only succeeded thanks to his family status. James barked like a cowering small dog.
So since I dumped you, you're moving on to that guy. This is business.
Thomas replied calmly.
I'm here today as a lawyer for your wife.
Those words, how reassuring they were to me. The term wife reflected Tom's character of clearly separating public and private matters.
If you have a lawyer, it'll be quick, right?
Amanda opened her mouth mockingly.
You want compensation money from the divorce trial, don't you? That's not it.
No need to hold back. Here. Saying that, she carelessly took something out and threw it at me. I will take the heir, the young master. Here's $10,000 in settlement money. It hit my foot, making a faint sound. It was a bundle of bills. Seeing me stunned, Amanda burst out laughing. To the triumphant Amanda, an unexpected voice came flying.
The heir is Dorothy.
Huh? A dumbfounded moment passed. Thomas started laughing as loudly as Amanda. I looked at James. He too had a look of disbelief on his face.
That's ridiculous. I'm Dad's son.
That's right. Tom nodded once, then continued his explanation. However, this is the decision of the conglomerate's chairman, your father.
Don't talk nonsense. Why would Dad?
Even as he retorted, James' face gradually turned pale. He must be thinking, it can't be. Amanda also seemed shaken by Tom's words. To the two of them, Tom said in a businesslike tone, "The chairman knew everything."
What did you say?
James finally started trembling violently. It's no wonder. Looking back on his deeds up until now, they were all things that would tarnish the conglomerate's prestige. Even James must know that. And if William had grasped all those actions. The chairman said he had been waiting for the day James would have a change of heart. But with this incident, the chairman judged that a change of heart was hopeless.
Wait. I'll talk to Dad right now.
Compared to Tom's clear voice, James' voice was pathetic. At the same time, the chairman highly valued Dorothy's dedication thus far and appointed her as the guardian of his grandchild.
Grandchild? Dad doesn't have a...
James stopped mid-sentence, seeming to understand. James looked at me with a surprised face. I nodded.
William's successor isn't you. It's your child inside my belly. You never said a word about having a child,
said James, flustered.
I was going to tell you soon. I never thought I'd end up telling you like this, though.
Even as I answered, there was a sense of emptiness. James and I are already over as husband and wife. Maybe we were over from the start. In any case, I felt sorry for the child that would be born between such parents.
You said you didn't see Dorothy as a woman.
Amanda, enraged, yelled at James. Still looking bewildered, James said in a hurry,
I have an obligation to leave an heir. What will you do if that heir takes your position? I never even thought about it.
The two exploded in anger at each other. I said, exasperated, until this child comes of age, I will be the organization's representative. In other words, Dorothy is essentially the successor. Tom added cleverly. James, his face pale, asked tremblingly,
So what happens to me now?
Naturally, you'll have to step down from your current position. That seat belongs to Dorothy. Saying that, Tom took out some documents from his briefcase and showed them. They all had the chairman's signature.
Oh no!
James, upon receiving and checking the documents, collapsed on the spot. The documents slipped from James' hands and fluttered in the air. Someone swiftly grabbed them. It was Amanda.
If we tear this up, it'll be meaningless,
she said, tearing the documents in anger. Yet Thomas remained unfazed. Those documents are copies.
What?
The real documents are with the chairman. Now, go to the chairman. And try tearing up all the documents. Clear provocation and contempt were contained in those words. Amanda screamed.
There's no way we can do that.
Just give up, Amanda said firmly. It's all been decided, Thomas stated with finality. Thomas turned on his heel. And I followed suit, starting to walk away. From behind, I heard James' weak, pleading voice.
Wait. Let's call off the divorce. That child needs a father. Right?
Maybe if you were a normal dad. I didn't even bother turning around anymore. With my back still turned, I said, But you? You'll only be a bad example for this child. But you? You'll only be a bad example for this child.
Dorothy, don't say that. I'm the kids.
He was probably trying to assert that he was the dad. Interrupting his voice, I declared,
This child has no dad. Don't be ridiculous.
His weak voice suddenly turned angry.
If it's not my kid, then they can't be the successor, right?
That's right. That's why William made his decision. James got into a car accident and is gone now. At least, that's what Will announced to the public.
What the hell is that?
Weakness and confusion returned to James' voice. Yes. That's how it should be, James. If we reveal the truth as is, it will tarnish the prestige of the conglomerate. That's why the chairman is using the accident as a pretext to exile you and entrust everything to his grandchild.
But this man is still alive,
Amanda said desperately. With my hand on the doorknob, I replied, "Why don't you turn on the TV? The news about James being in an accident should be on by now."
No way!
The boldness vanished from Amanda's usually assertive voice. Thomas and I left the room. Walking side by side down the hallway, I asked,
What's going to happen to James now?
"Who knows? Maybe he'll be given a new identity and have to start over from scratch." Thomas's tone had returned to its usual casual manner. His job was done. Now, my job was waiting for me. Many media outlets had jumped on the story of a former doctor who had lost her husband in an accident and would now live as the guardian of his child. After all, there was already a high level of social interest in me to begin with. An unknown doctor catches the eye of the chairman of a conglomerate and becomes his son's wife. That alone was already impactful enough. How do you feel right now?
Me? Not much. I just feel sorry for my son.
I conveyed my true feelings to the reporters pointing their microphones at me. In my arms was the newborn figure of my son, Brian.
This child doesn't like the sound of camera shutters.
Sorry about that. Brian was now an important figure who single-handedly carried the future of the conglomerate on his shoulders. I couldn't afford to draw his ire. I made my way through the waves of reporters surrounding my home. I got into the company car and headed to work.
Excuse me.
The car stopped midway and a woman got in. It was Deborah, the babysitter who would take care of Brian in my place. "Thanks for your help again today."
Of course.
Nodding, Deborah held Brian close. Brian let out a happy laugh. A smile also appeared on Deborah's face.
I can't believe he's become so attached to me.
Your sincerity got through to him. When I said that, Deborah smiled. With someone like her, I can entrust my son with peace of mind. The car started moving again. My new workplace is the space James used to dominate. However, his subordinates had the worst impression of him. When I arrived at the office, one of the subordinates who had just come to work spoke to me.
Good morning, Dorothy.
Good morning. I returned the greeting in the same manner. We walked together, chatting casually.
I'm so glad you're here, Dorothy,
the subordinate said with a deep sense of relief. I gave a wry smile. Oh, you're exaggerating.
No, James just dumped all the work on us and did nothing himself. To be honest, he was a nuisance.
The subordinate's true feelings. I felt a chill in my heart. I'll work hard so I don't get the same evaluation.
Yes.
The subordinate's face, nodding in agreement, was filled with expectation and trust. For now, I'm adored by my subordinates. But it's not because I'm capable. It's simply a psychological response of expecting the next boss to be better because the previous one was so bad. I need to stay on my toes. Muttering to myself, I started my desk work. Because James had been slacking off, work was greatly stagnant. Just getting through it required a lot of time and effort. I went to see Brian after work. I could have had him wait at home, but I wanted to see Brian during my break, so I had Brian and Deborah wait in a separate room. Also, at home, we would be surrounded by reporters. Having them accompany me was also about protecting them.
Dorothy.
Where's Brian? When I asked Deborah, who had approached me, she showed me Brian in her arms. Brian was sleeping peacefully. He's sleeping so well.
He's such a good boy.
Is that so? I couldn't help thinking that it was good he didn't resemble James. Brian's features definitely had traces of James. Maybe his personality will end up being similar too. I had a moment of such anxiety. I wonder who Brian takes after. Sleeping so peacefully like this.
It's definitely you, Dorothy.
You think so? A heartwarming moment passed. It was when I left the office and headed for my ride. Dorothy. Suddenly, a man in dirty clothes leaped out from the shadows. His appearance had changed drastically, but I recognized his voice. It was James.
Stay back. Okay.
Deborah was terrified. I stood between her and Brian, guarding them from James.
What's this all of a sudden?
You ruined my whole life. The conversation was completely disjointed. James continued to rant.
You took my place. If it weren't for you, give me back my place.
James was growling like a stray dog. I replied calmly. I didn't take it.
It was taken from you because you didn't fulfill your responsibilities. Shut up. I bet you whispered in Dad's ear and had him kick me out.
James, consumed by suspicion, couldn't be reached with words. Deborah asked timidly.
That man, could he be? That's right.
A man who is already considered long gone by society. That's James. However, James himself is still alive, abandoned without any help, all alone.
I shouldn't have bothered with you in the first place.
Another figure appeared. It was Amanda, also in a disheveled state. Amanda pointed at James and shouted.
I only gave you a chance because you said you were a rich boy, but now you've fallen to being just a jobless bum. Then get away from me. Having you around is just a nuisance when you can't even cook.
He retorted back at Amanda, not backing down. Amanda's face contorted even more with anger.
What are you saying? I can't get a job because your father leaked my information to corporate executives. Take responsibility. That's because you got greedy beyond your status.
The two endlessly complained about each other. Truly, weren't they a perfect match no matter what?
They're suspicious people. Someone call the police.
I grabbed Deborah's hand and started running. Right now, the two of them were absorbed in each other in a sense. It was now or never to escape.
Hey, Dorothy! Don't you run away, you coward.
I felt the two of them chasing after us. Hearing the commotion from inside the office, male employees and security guards came rushing out. Before long, the two were restrained by the sturdy security guards. James shouted in frustration.
I didn't do anything. So why am I going through this? Doing nothing is your problem.
I said that, as if spitting it out. James and Amanda were taken away by the police as dangerous individuals. From then on, they were forbidden from approaching me and Brian.
Forbidden from approaching my own wife and child? That's ridiculous.
He apparently made that claim, but of course, James was no longer my husband or anything. The more he spoke, the more he creeped out those around him, they say. Amanda also couldn't get a job because William pulled some strings behind the scenes, so she reluctantly stuck with James.
She's the woman who stole James from me and Dad from Brian. I can't forgive her.
William said that, quietly angry.
They're both jobless and struggling to even eat. They don't have any savings from fooling around.
So somehow, they showed up seeking financial assistance or something from me. Despite that, they didn't even apologize to me or anything. Half a year passed since James and Amanda's intrusion. During that time, Deborah returned to her parents' home from the shock, and I ended up taking care of Brian. It was really tough. I'd go see him during breaks and after work to breastfeed him. Just that made me feel like a mom, but the reality wasn't like that at all.
You're crying again. What's wrong? Are you hungry? Or is something wrong with your diaper?
Even when I talked to him, there was no response. He was still a baby who couldn't speak yet. I picked up the sobbing Brian and gently called his name.
Don't cry, Brian.
I wonder if those words got through to him. Brian looked up at me with teary eyes. I'm sorry, Brian, that you don't have a dad. But I'll work hard for both of us. I said that with a prayer. The words still didn't seem to get through. He probably just happened to stop crying by coincidence.
Deborah will take care of you again starting tomorrow.
I got a call from Deborah. She said she recovered from the shock and will return to her babysitting job. Brian is more attached to Deborah, if anything. She spends more time with him and has been handling this difficult childcare. I'm grateful, not jealous at all. But
I'll become a mom you can be proud of.
From now on, I won't just leave it all to Deborah, I'll study childcare too. And so, let's live together, the two of us, with my one and only irreplaceable family.